Good evening and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Season 7, Episode 13, Field of Fire. Before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
That is correct. And as I say every single week, you should find us and follow us because we are great, we are awesome, we are good time, and we are discussing the 163rd episode of this fantastic show in the greater Star Trek franchise. I still think that even with all the new stuff that's come out, that Deep Space Nine is the best. This is not necessarily to knock Next Gen. Put a little asterisk next to Next Gen because without it, we wouldn't have had the slew of shows that came next for sure. But Deep Space Nine, I just feel like it has the grittier, harder hitting episodes that we just don't have anywhere else. Even in some of the more contemporary stuff, we just don't have them. So just got to say it's the 163rd episode, which means also, unfortunately, soon we'll be at an end. There will be no more episodes to discuss.
Once we finish this episode, if there are 26 episodes a season, and this is number 13 of this season, that means this is the halfway point of this season, the final season.
Yeah, I mean, man, time has sure flown for us in doing this. This is what we're in. Year 2, year 3?
This is 3.5. We're like 3.5.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's been a bit. So
yeah.
This is the part where I kind of start to just
wax poetic.
Yeah, But of course, before we get into this episode tonight, we want to do our weekly check-in. And this last week was a little special for David here. So, David, why don't you go ahead and tell us, how has your week been?
It was good. So, yeah, my birthday was on, what was that, Monday? So, I think I had mentioned last week because I had been with family on Sunday. So the day of our recording, we had gone out and I had spent some time with my nieces. But I got a package from my sister with some books. The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson is a fantasy novel that I plan on reading at some point.
Have you talked about that one before? That sounds familiar.
I don't know about that necessarily. It is a Brandon Sanderson finished the Eye of the Wheel of Time novels.
Wheel of Time. Maybe that's why the name sounds familiar. But okay, go ahead. Wheel of Time.
So the Wheel of Time, the original author Robert Jordan died before he could finish it. So Brandon Sanderson was brought in to finish it, and he's a fantasy author of his own, and he has a series of books out, starting with The Way of Kings. That book is 1,000 pages long, according to the copy my sister sent me. And I plan on reading it at some point, but I have so many books that it'll be a little bit. She also sent me a book called The Myth Makers, which is about C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. They were friends and colleagues at Oxford, if I remember correctly. And so, The Lord of the Rings and Chronicles of Narnia are the two series that they both wrote. However, the one unexpected gift that I got from you, sir, was the autobiography of Benjamin Sisko.
Yes.
It was fun to open up that box because you had talked about this. You've read it. It's been a while since you've read it, I assume.
Yes. So, yes, I do have my copy.
There you go. Boom.
I've read pieces of it. I have not finished it because obviously I got this and we were still very much in the middle of another book series, so I didn't want to split too much time.
Right.
But it's just we both love the character of Benjamin Sisko so much,
right?
And in getting this book, it was too tempting to not at least peruse through and read snippets. And I mean, already when I remember when I was reading through it, you hear his voice, you understand, it's really good, the bits that I've seen so far. So I wanted to see bits that I've read so far. So I wanted to make sure that you got a copy because, as I said, we're coming up on the end of the show now.
And I assume
this is read this until you should wait until the end,
right?
Because it's laced with riddled with spoilers. So just don't even do it. So
Yeah, I figured this is going to be a great last episode for us for the Deep Space for the Fire Caves. We'll do the finale of the show. We'll do at least one episode of us having talking about this. So we still have 13 episodes left. So that means we have at least 14th episode planned. So
there you go.
yeah,
Now, I wanted to also say with these books here that feature one particular character, the captains in particular, there are several of these that are out now for basically legendary characters of note. So you've got the one for Picard, I believe, is the one that kicked it all off. They
okay.
did one for Captain Picard first, and then the next one was Captain Janeway. Then they had gone through and they've done Kirk, of course, Cisco. Cisco was the most recent one,
Okay.
and then I know that Spock also has one. So it's like at first it seemed like they were kind of keeping it to the captains, and then they added Spock in there as well. Which I mean, you could technically get around because Spock does achieve the rank of captain,
Right.
But was he ever really like? We always knew that if it was going to be if Kirk and Spock were involved, we knew that Kirk is going to be the leader, not Spock. So,
Right.
but basically, it kind of became a thing of again characters of note, characters of kind of reach that legendary status. And so, whether or not they get around to doing other characters and giving them their own autobiography, I doubt it. I could see maybe characters like Seven of Nine may get one. Worf may get one. Captain Archer, that's a good point. I've not seen one for Captain Archer yet. Like I said, this was the most recent release. The Cisco one was the most recent release. So they may be working on it.
Yeah, it says this came out in November 2023. So
yeah,
we were doing the show well into the show before this book ever came out. So I thought this book came out like 10 years ago.
No. They really just kind of started doing this. Like I believe that the one again, like Picard kicked it off, and I think that the one for Picard came out in like 2017, 2018. So it's a fairly recent series that they're getting into. So they may get around to doing some other characters, but like I said, I think that they're kind of sticking to the captains and then other characters who've achieved like that legendary status. So I think that Seven of Nine would probably be a good entry. Worf would be another one that's a good entry. But after that they'd be pretty much done because Data might get one because he's unique character android. So again, stuff like that. Those are going to be like the standouts to get them. But all that to say, from what I've read, like I read the Picard one, I've read the Janeway one. They're both pretty good books. My only critique on the Janeway one was there was another book that had been written years ago in the mid 90s that kind of did some of the same thing for Janeway. And it seems like what they wrote in their Janeway version of this kind of book really messed that one up, and that one was already considered canon because it was written by the original writer and developer of the character of Catherine Janeway. So it's just like that person who really knew the character obviously wrote their own autobiography for the character of Janeway, and then years later someone else did this other one that kind of messes it up a bit. So it's like did you know this is out there? But it is what it is. They're both still pretty good books. But because I read the original one by the original character developer in the 90s first, that one stands out in my mind as like the definitive Janeway autobiography. So,
gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to reading that. That was a fun little surprise to get from you.
Yeah, I couldn't let you go for your birthday and not get you a gift. I didn't want to say anything. We were in a group chat with some people, and they were talking about your birthday and everything. And I was like, well, I don't want to say, hey, I'm the only one who got him a gift or anything. So I'll just be quiet and just sit here and just it's coming. It's in the
right.
It's coming through the mail. He'll get it. So
yeah, it was good to see it. So I look forward to doing like wrap-up episode. I definitely think we should do an episode where we rewatch the pilot and like just talk
Absolutely.
about the show, having rewatched the pilot.
And we have to rewatch Move Along Home because it's like your favorite. We have to see how it stacks up after all this time and watching the other episodes. So,
oh man, maybe if you hold a gun to my head, we'll do it. But yeah. So what else has happened this week? It was interesting. They gave me off on Monday because I think I've talked with you a little bit about this, and it's not quite been announced 100% yet. But this week, it's finally happening. The company I work for is going to go out of business. They are closing up shop. They're going to do a liquidation sale. Tomorrow morning, we're having a meeting to kind of talk about some of the details. And then Thursday of this week is when it starts. So if anyone hearing me say this now is wanting to, take advantage of me preemptively announcing it here on the Fire Caves, just know that it doesn't officially start till Thursday, so don't expect anything until then. But that does mean that work was slow this week. It's been kind of slow for a while, as I've mentioned multiple times here on the show. There have been a few weeks where it picks back up and things are looking good, but in general, it's just been slower and slower and slower. And so now it's just time to close up shop and move on, do something different, which is a good kick in the pants for me because I've been doing this job for 10 years. Been working for the mattress industry.
No.
You did it for 4 years. Is that right?
I did it for 4 years and 11 months. So
just shy of 5, huh?
Just shy of my 5th year anniversary. So I didn't get the whatever it is gift that Mattress Firm would give at 5 years. You got a gift at 5 years, 10 years, and then 25 years. And I only knew 2 people to ever get the 25-year gift. And both of those people ended up losing their job for fraud. So
yeah, I remember hearing about those too.
Yeah, I'm not wasn't too pressed to make it, past that time period.
Right.
But I mean, as they say, one door closes, another one opens. You've got some prospects in line. Have you started looking yet? Have you decided maybe you're going to take a little time off, do a little soul searching? What do you want to do?
I'd love to take some time off if I could. Unfortunately, my bank account says you need to get that solved. Let me put it this way. I've noticed more and more my bank account being like, you need to get this solved. So it already was out of my mind the last several months, like, okay, this is just not correcting itself. I need to figure it out. So again, it's nice that the company finally as a group was like, yeah, this ain't working for all of us. We're all done. So it's kind of a kick in the pants for me to get on some. I'm one of those people who struggles with looking for work in the sense of like, part of me feels like I should have some sort of grand ambition, grand career space that I'm supposed to be in, but I don't have anything I'm drawn toward. So it's like I have a dearth of options. I have all the things before me that I might be willing to do, but none of them has any sort of real attraction. So they might as well. It's a whole thing for me.
No,
but,
I completely understand. Sometimes I find myself, being like, you have a massive intellect. You should be doing way more than you're doing. And if I let myself go too far down that path, I will find myself awake at 2 a.m. mad that I'm not running a small country somewhere. So, I completely get it.
Yeah, it was funny. It's funny you said that you feel like you have a massive intellect. My roommate, he was out with some friends last night for a little party, a birthday party. I had to miss it, unfortunately, but they had a little bit of alcohol, and he was joking, or he was laughing at himself because they had margaritas, but they also had spiked orange juice, mimosas, and he didn't realize the mimosas were already had alcohol in them, so he put more in, and he feels like he overdid it, and so I have to agree with him that he gets talkative when he gets some alcohol in him, which is fine. It's not like it's a problem. But he was like, "Yeah, David, you're a smart guy, man. You could do something. You could find something. You don't have to keep doing what you're doing." I was like, "Thanks, man. Thanks for the vote of confidence. I really appreciate that." But yeah, it was funny last night. We were just chatting about life and stuff. But yeah, that's been the past week. How about you? What's up with you?
Mainly, I have been doing my reading and going through that training that I talked about earlier to keep my books handy so I can always talk about them. If you're interested at all in
Oh yeah.
learning Python, SQL, all those things, and maybe turn this into a career path or whatever, I would definitely recommend these. No, anything just to say, by the way, anything that we talk about on the show, we say we recommend it or check it out or whatever else, we're not paid for any of it. So don't worry about that. All right. Just don't. This is not an advertisement because we're going to get money on the back end. We're not. This is just stuff that we do and we like it. So we're sharing with you. So that said,
Boom.
I found these online. I checked them out. I've enjoyed what I've learned so far. It's very straightforward. It's very easy to use. The pages are great. They give you ample space to like review stuff and to make your own notations. They lay flat, so if you're trying to like work from this and do stuff online on your computer or whatever else, it's very easy to do. It comes with several online courses as well that you can go through. So it's not just you reading the book and then trying to duplicate what it says from the book or whatever. They actually have it set up so that you have like real sites that you can actually like go and work on and plug stuff in and not worry about it like messing up your computer or any of your software or anything like that. So that's really cool. But yeah, I would suggest checking these out. I'm going to show that real quick, just in case you want to, take a look at that at all. But yeah, they're great. I've been enjoying it. And they offer, like I said, it's like a 12 or there's a 15-week version that you can do. And it just kind of goes through all of the main, programmer languages that are available and that are in heavy use right now. So if you're just curious, great.
Right.
If you want to use it for something, even better. I suggest checking it out if you've got any interest whatsoever. I've been doing that. I've also been retooling and doing the workouts and stuff. That's been going okay. I'm still struggling with the get up and go part of the early morning ones. I can wake up. I can definitely wake up,
Right.
but to then roll out and get to the gym and all that stuff, that's the hard part. I can wake up at 4 a.m. and lay in my bed until 8, and it's not a problem at all. But getting up at 4 to be out the door by like 4:30, 5 o'clock, it just seems like it's next to impossible. So, but I've only been on this kick for a week. Today is what, the 8th. So yeah, it's been officially 8 days. So that's fine. I'm just going to keep rolling with it and keep doing it. And we'll see what happens.
Right.
But we're not here to talk about all that. We are here to talk about this 163rd episode. And for the sake of time, I think I will go ahead and do the recap because we want to get into it. Okay.
Go for it.
And it's not to say that you can't do it quickly, but yeah.
Go for it. Yeah.
So again, the episode is called Field of Fire. This is a Ezri Dax episode. Ooh, so
yeah, we'll talk about that.
Here we go. Right. So, this episode is kind of the, standard fare. It starts in Quarks. We've got Bashir, Odo. No, Odo's not there, but Bashir, O'Brien, Ezri, Kira, and then like a smattering of junior officers. And they're toasting one in particular, a Lieutenant Ilario, who has heroically piloted the Defiant through its most recent battle. And because of his expert skills, they have come out on top. So they're toasting him. He's feeling really good. They end up shutting the bar down. And Ezri escorts him back to his quarters where he kind of drunkenly hits on her. But then she leaves because it's clear by now she's interested in Dr. Bashir. And if you haven't picked up on that already, you're not watching the show properly. All right. So that should not sound like a spoiler at all that she likes Julian. Okay. There. She leaves Ilario in his quarters. She goes down to hers, which apparently their quarters are not too far away from each other. And she goes to bed. Next morning, she wakes up. She's reviewing her schedule, hears commotion in the hall, goes out, sees several officers running by. She follows them to where they're going, and it's to Ilario's quarters, where she finds him murdered. He's sprawled out on the floor in the main area of his quarters with a hole in his chest. Odo, Cisco, and O'Brien are there. They're trying to figure out what's going on, how he was murdered. They realize a projectile weapon was used. Odo makes a reference to the fact that there was no basically gunpowder. There's no powdery residue because he reads 20th century crime novels. So he knows that, yeah, as one does when you are the chief of police, basically, and has nothing else to do with your life except read about 20th century crime on Earth, of all places, So whatever. So he knows that something isn't quite right because the projectile should have left residue, didn't. So they're all kinds of curious. Ezri seems to struggle a little bit with the fact that this young man has been shot. She talks with Bashir about it a little bit, and then Odo and Odo's leading the investigation while O'Brien's sort of kind of helping out. We get to a scene where O'Brien and Bashir are also talking about the murder and how it could have happened. And there's also a lot of talk about how this is the 24th century. This is, Starfleet, and these things are unheard of. And, no one would do this kind of thing. Another murder happens, this time an older woman. And same thing, though. She's murdered in her quarters, shot, not sure how it's done. Mm-hmm. With O'Brien and Bashir, they're talking about guns in general and how important guns used to be way back when. Bashir starts talking to him about Davy Crockett and his rifle and, trick shots that he used to do. And that's when O'Brien realizes that there was a way for this shot to have occurred, and seemingly an amazing shot. Mm-hmm. He calls for Odo and Ezri to go to one of the science labs where he has set up a purple melon as this demonstration. And the melon explodes in front of them, to which O'Brien then walks into the room and reveals this massive rifle that he has modified with a personal transporter, basically, that combined with the headset will allow you to basically be anywhere and to focus on your target. And when you shoot the bullet is dematerialized and beamed just a few, centimeters in front of your target, and continue on its trajectory and blow them up, which I've got all kinds of questions about that because
I do too.
But we'll get in. We're going to get into that because that part didn't make any sense to me at all. They didn't do a good job of explaining it. But whatever. Now we know how the gun works. All right. So now we have to figure out who's doing this. And for some reason, Ben decides that Ezri has enough training in forensic psychology or whatever, that she should be like assisting or taking lead on the investigation. But of course, Ezri, being the the young officer that she is, can't do it by herself. So she calls up memories of murder master Duran Dax, the one who we all know from when Jadzia was in control, that Duran was a murderer who for 6 months he was joined to the Dax Symbiont, and during that time he murdered 3 people. So she calls up Duran. Duran kind of gets her reacquainted with the killer instinct and helps her to start tracking down this murderer and figuring out their motive and intent and all this other kind of stuff. Right. This helps to further destabilize Ezri to one point where when another Federation officer was under suspicion, he was running away from Odo through Quarks. She trips said guy up, jumps on him, attacks him, grabs a knife and almost stabs him before Odo intervenes and stops her. Ben Cisco, being understandably concerned with the unraveling of this junior officer, he threatens to take her off of the case, but he doesn't because it's Dax and he's got a soft spot for Dax, so he lets her continue. She is battling with herself via Duran and basically is upset that Duran is pushing her to become a killer like him. But he's just like, you're never going to be able to catch this guy unless you, kind of give in to some things. They do some more of this kind of 24th century Criminal Minds-esque stuff of putting her in the mind of the killer. They realize that the killer is cold, calculating, detached, has an issue with emotions, which leads them down the path to a Vulcan, of all people. There's only 47 Vulcans on the station. They're able to eliminate a good portion of them, down to like 20 something. Yeah. And then it just so happens that she gets into the lift with
the one
Vulcan, who Duran, for all of his sensory whatever, which again got questions about, is able to stare at said Vulcan and be like, "It's him. I know it's him. He's the one."
Yep.
And so then she starts looking into this officer. He is a Vulcan. His name is Chulak, which, you know what? If you're a Stargate fan, Chulak, that name rings a bell. Anyway, we'll get into all that later. And she starts trying to track him down. She finds him in his quarters, and he's looking at something on the screen. She's able to zoom in and see that what he's looking at is actually her service record. Basically, in the same kind of way that she's put together that he's the killer, he seems to have put together that she's hot on his heels somehow. They don't really do a good job of putting those breadcrumbs together.
For those who are listening, I am shrugging very strongly, hands up in the air, shrugging. Yeah, keep going.
So he goes into another room. He pulls out his modified rifle. He puts on his headset. He begins looking for her. And it seems like there's a moment where they're seeing each other. She's already tracked him down and is like in prime position to take him out. He then, finally gets to the point where he sees her. She shoots first, which doesn't kill him, but it throws his trajectory off so that the bullet that he shot kind of goes, past her, but between her and Duran, but Duran's not there, so really just past her. It blows a hole in the wall, which is pushing out gas, which also ruffles Duran's hair, but Duran's not there, so why is anyway, not the point. Basically, she wounds him. She then goes to Chulak's quarters.
By herself.
By herself. She finds him crawling on the floor trying to get to the rifle. She steps on it, pulls it away, picks it up, levels it at the dude, and we're supposed to believe that she was this close to killing him before she decides, I'm no killer. And she steps back. She calls for a medical team, not security, but a medical team.
Yeah.
To come and take care of the dude. And basically we find out that Chulak had suffered some terrible emotional trauma, and he was taking it out on other people who showed any kind of emotional exuberance. So
they had pictures in their room of them enjoying the company of other loved ones.
Yeah. And that was too much for him to bear. So he was taking them out.
And logic demanded that he do this, which does not explain, but
anything. Doesn't explain anything. So
that's
it.
That's the episode. This one.
Yeah, that's it. That's the episode. This was one of those. This was clearly, in my opinion, one of those times where either A, no one knew what to do with the story, like they had like a general idea,
right?
Or B, all of your A team writers were busy doing something else and couldn't be bothered to do this with. Like those are the only two things I can think of that would make any kind of sense, because like the initial premise sounds good, but they completely dropped the ball in every way on this one.
I started this episode going, oh, this is great. A murder mystery? Like, when's the last time we've had a murder mystery on a Star Trek episode? And like a legitimate one. Like, this kid just died. We have the main character as a prime, it turns out internally is a prime candidate for who might actually be the murderer, because she has a nightmare sequence where she thinks she's the murderer, and then she's actually calling up the memories of a memory inside her, a murderer inside her, to help her figure out who the killer is. Just to be clear, one of the books I just read was called The Werewolf Cop, and as I mentioned, like the whole part of the plot is like he's he's turning into a werewolf. So he's responsible for a killing about halfway through the book because he's a werewolf and he killed someone. So like he has to like avoid getting accused of this murder because of the werewolf. And so anyway, great plotting when it comes to a murder mystery is like, oh, am I the one who did it, or am I going to be held in suspicion for having done it? At no point does anyone ever say to Ezri, did you maybe do this? So that plot line is never really gone explored. It could have been briefly, even Odo being like, you were with him last night, right up until he died, or sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna agree with you. You're absolutely right. I mean, like the way that Ezri is given, like she's like in this weird protective bubble where they let her do a bunch of stuff that she's got no business doing. And it's only because she's Dax that they let her do it. But Ezri herself has no experience. And it was different with Jadzia because Jadzia, while also young when we first met her, was a trained, qualified science officer, for one thing.
Right.
And in another, she was also a full-on Trill initiate. She completed her training. She completed everything she needed to do in order to be joined. These are two things that Ezri does not have whatsoever. She's drifting off of the expertise of people like Jadzia, Curzon. We see blatantly here, Duran is carrying her in this. They don't rely on her skill as a psychologist or a therapist or a counselor or anything like that to understand any of this. In fact, when she does try to do it on her own, she's stumped. She has no clue what to do. She has no sense of direction, doesn't know how to carry on an investigation, nothing. She has to rely on Duran to get it done. And I think that the intent was to make us feel like Ezri had some kind of like edge to her, but really, it just really kind of, to me, highlighted just how incompetent she really was. Like, go ahead.
And to put a fine point on what you just said, when Sisko asked her, how did you do in forensic counseling or whatever, her response is not, I did well, or
I aced it, class. Or I was got top marks.
Not even that. No. Not even like I took it in college and it's been a while, a little rusty, but I think I have some skills that I might be able to. No, her response is not my favorite class or something like that.
Yeah, that's what she says.
And it's like from the get-go, Ezri has been introduced to us as a kind of pathetic character. I'm just going to say it.
But at the same time, it's like you're right. I just want to say at the same time, as much as she's been introduced that way, she's also been introduced as like the second coming of Dax, like a better Jadzia.
Well, only in the sense of like, I'll say this. Everything about her is, I wasn't expecting to be made a symbiote host because I never trained for it. And I am all, twiddly about becoming one, and my memories, blah, blah, blah. Like, Jadzia had her moments, as we know, but she never had this kind of wimpiness about her that Ezri has. And, like, when Ezri says it wasn't my favorite class or it wasn't my favorite subject, it just, like, Sisko himself, like, he stops himself from rolling his eyes. Like, you can see it in the kid.
He's kind of exasperated. He's kind of exasperated with it. Like, absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, it's just she's drifting off this whole I'm Dax. So and take away that, and what is she? She's a junior officer herself.
Right.
She was only recently promoted, and she only got the promotion because Ben demanded she get the promotion.
Yes.
If she wasn't carrying the Dax symbiont, she would never have met him. She never would have got that promotion. She would be off on another ship somewhere, whatever. But let's just remove that from it as well. And let's just say that somehow.
I just want to quickly say she is a round peg shoved in a Jadzia square hole. And that's her whole problem. Yeah. Go ahead.
But let's just say that somehow, because she goes from Ezri Tegan to Ezri Dax when she gets joined. Let's say young Lieutenant Junior grade Ezri Tegan had shown up on Deep Space Nine. Do you think that she would have been involved in a massive murder investigation with all of the chief senior officers? No, not at all. She wouldn't have been on their radar, even if she was there as a counselor. You know how many counselors there are on that station? There's no way she would have been their first choice. She would have been their third choice.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. She does not present in any way of having any supreme knowledge, skill set, or understanding that is uniquely hers.
Right.
Everything that she does and everything that we've seen so far has been something based off of a past life. Duran, Curzon, Jadzia, so forth and so on.
Right.
The only time that she ever really... Go ahead.
I'll say anything that makes her interesting is the Dax symbiote. The Ezri character is not interesting.
But she's cute. But she's cute.
It.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's annoying. It's annoying to me. It really is annoying to me. And I try to find things to like about all the characters. Right. I just feel like maybe if instead of being thrown onto this show in the last season or whatever it was, at the time, if maybe they had put her on Voyager, I think she would have worked better on Voyager. Right. That kind of young character who is uncertain about their future, who had an idea of what their projected career path was going to be, only to find themselves fantastically derailed by a momentous event and now having to refigure out your life path and what you're going to do. That was all of what Voyager was about.
Right.
And I don't think that they were trying to capture some of that and put it on this show because, again, by the time Voyager was up and running, this show was already in its 4th, 5th season. So there was no need for that. I just feel like the character probably would have done better on that show than here. Yeah, not a good fit. This episode just further highlights that the character of Ezri was poorly executed. No, not poorly executed, because it's not Nicole's fault. No. I will not pass this off on her.
She's
it was
never at fault.
Poorly designed.
Yes,
it was a rush job.
Character.
Yes,
rush job. And this episode, once again, puts a huge, fine point on the fact that Jadzia never had an episode like this. There was never an episode where Jadzia had an emotional, internal struggle and journey like Ezri has here. And just 2 episodes ago, she got a whole episode to herself.
About her family.
About her family.
Yeah.
They're like Cisco barely showed up and no one else showed up except O'Brien. And here he is again. And it's like, hey, Ezri, our new character who replaced that one character who we don't want to mention, but we have to because she was so integral to the show up until that point that we have to mention her. Jadzia. So like this whole time I'm watching it and I'm like this is supposed to be an Odo episode because it's about a murder mystery. I mean, the whole boy is reading 20th century crime novels. Come on now.
They even said, like, because I read some of the behind the scenes stuff about it, and it was just like, they even said that they intentionally moved this away from Odo because they feel like we've already seen Odo in that particular light doing an investigation, whatever. It's like, but I'm sorry, that's his job. He's chief security. He should be doing the investigation. Anything, they should have done a better job of teaming Odo up with Ezri, not making this Ezri leading the show. That was another mistake.
Yeah, they had Ezri sitting down with O'Brien and Bashir, and like O'Brien and Bashir are feeling bad that they didn't let the young pilot join them in the Hollow Suite because they apparently get up to some sort of private. Apparently, it's a little too private up there in the Hollow Suite for the 2 boys.
Yeah, that phrasing didn't age well.
Keiko is apparently been long gone. She's back on Earth, and it's been a while. I don't know how to say it other than that. But anyway, they're feeling bad they didn't have the pilot come join them, and he died the next morning. But anyway, Ezri asks, can Odo handle it? And they're like, if anyone can, it'll be Odo. So, like, Odo is set up to be the guy, which is also why, as you pointed out, when she, like, calls for a medical team at the end, not a medical and security team, Odo, Dr. Bashir, I have the suspect. He's wounded in his quarters. She doesn't say that. Just bring a medical team. Why? The guy who was killing people from a freaking distance because he has magical tech.
I shot him.
Oh, and we have to get to talking about the rifle. We don't have to get there yet.
Oh,
We have to talk
no,
about that.
right. So, and so again, I do want to point out, because like I said, this episode is full of so much potential, and it's not Nicole's fault that this was such a disaster. And it's funny to me because, again, when you look at some of the behind the scenes stuff and they talk about these episodes, the actors, they talk about how much they enjoyed it. She talks about how much she enjoyed it. She got to play something different, whatever. And I mean, on the one hand, I get that, but on the other, it's like, do you guys not get a say at all in like character portrayal or continuity at the very least? Like, I don't know if the actors really keep some of that stuff in mind or not about the characters that they play. But I feel like I would, if I was an actor and I was playing a character or stepping into a role of an established character, I'd constantly be questioning and be like, hey, are we sure that this doesn't mess up something that was already established, 4 or 5 seasons ago before I got on the show? Like, I don't want someone to, be upset or the story fall apart because it gets picked apart over something that you guys clearly said 5 seasons ago was not a thing, and now we're saying it is a thing. And what I'm thinking about in talking about this is, of course, Duran himself. It was established, like in this episode, she talks about how she had, or that Curzon and Jadzia had suppressed
memories.
Yeah, they had firmly suppressed Duran. And that was going to be part of her struggle, was she wasn't going to be able to suppress him the way that they had before. But let's back up a bit. And if we remember the episode in particular where we first encountered Duran, it wasn't that Jadzia was suppressing him. The Trill Joining Society, or whatever they're called, had intentionally put blocks on those memory engrams or whatever, and they were destabilizing. It was causing Jadzia to actually get sick and reject the symbiont. She had to go through that whole thing of the rejoining or whatever it was called in order to reintegrate Duran into the symbiont so that it didn't kill her. That wasn't something that she did by choice. She wasn't monumentally strong mentally, again, pushing this, suppressing these memories. They were actively blocked from her.
Right.
So I don't like that they kind of rephrase this. And again, it's something that does a disservice to Ezri, because it makes Ezri seem weaker than she really is.
Right.
So again, I don't know who wrote this, where they were when all those other episodes were like out there. But yeah, they didn't do a good job of like checking the basics of continuity. Like, all you have to do is watch the Trill episodes. There's not many. It's not like you had 7 seasons, and you had 40 episodes of Trill nonsense you had to get through to make sure it was correct. You got maybe like what?
5,
right, I'm gonna say that are legitimately focused on Trill and Trill Society and Trill Joining. Right. You've got maybe 4 or 5 episodes total. You couldn't knock off one afternoon and watch all of them before you sat down and started writing this schlock. Come on.
Yeah.
Stop being lazy.
Well, and then as you point out, we have seen what is his name again? Duran before. Yeah. And there was that episode where like Jadzia had all of the other main characters like take on one of the personas, and it was Sisko.
Shantara.
And it was Sisko who took on the Duran character, and he was like a maniac. He was
they had to lock him away, but like they had to set up a special cell. He was in the brig and stuff. They had him already ready to go to be imprisoned because they didn't want him to. And even then, it wasn't enough. Duran tried to kill Sisko while he was in there. We didn't see any evidence of that at all. She just lets Duran out.
Right.
Has access.
Hey, you with the memories of the thing that happened. Why are you doing this? Like, oh my gosh. Like, she was like, I'm going to call up this murderer so he can help me. And I was already in the place of like, well, she had this like nightmare of maybe killing the guy. Like, are we going to turn this into Ezri? Like, was like a Dr. Jinkle, Mr. Hyde type murderer with all these people? Like,
that honestly would have been a better episode.
It would have. It would have been a bit dark. I mean, Ezri is supposed to be this cute little counselor that just came on board recently, but I mean, heck, let's do it.
I mean, maybe that's why they didn't do it, because it was just like they didn't want to ruin this image of their cute new Jadzia and making her this, in the dark, in the shadows, she's just a bloodthirsty murderer.
Yeah. Well, it would mean the character would not be allowed to continue on as is. They would have to say to her, "You can't control your impulses. You can't control Mr. Hyde." Basically,
they would have to do to her what they did to Duran. So
forcibly separate the Dax symbiote. And staying with Duran, this version of Duran was annoying. I hate characters like this who just whisper in your ear, follow your instincts, just do it, and it's like, this is so annoying. Like, I know it's supposed to be is an internal manifestation, or is an external manifestation of an internal like character whispering in their ear, but it just came off. I mean, the actor who's playing Duran, unfortunately, I think he just overdoes it. Lee McCloskey is the actor's name. I feel like he just overdid it. I don't know if that was his acting or the directing they gave him or the writing, but he just came off as just a bit much. And by that point, it had moved away, as we've already said, from the angle of like Odo and like It was O'Brien who figured out that the rifle had this projectile situation.
Again, everybody but Jadzia, everybody but Ezri,
right?
Really did the clues. She was just making, basically, this could be interpreted as a series of intuitive leaps, because she's only talking to her internal. Right. That's her. Right. That's kind of the whole point, is that she is using this kind of forced perspective to understand the killer. But if you take away all those trappings, she's just guessing. Right. And so for those who can't see Duran, she would appear crazy. Yeah. She's roaming around the station. She's making wild assumptions and accusations. She's becoming increasingly hostile and violent. She's already attacked somebody at one point,
Attacked someone. Quark notices.
Quark notices, starts talking to herself. Worf sees her. He's been watching her.
What are you doing while we're in the middle of the night? Yeah.
Yeah. If this had been any other crew and episode, she would have been brought up already and been standing before Picard or Janeway or somebody and been like, several officers have reported you're staying out all. Yeah, you're acting strangely. You're staying out all hours. You're roaming the corridors. There's seemingly no place to go. You've become distant. You haven't finished any of your. We haven't seen you turn in a single report, right? We haven't seen her do any work, counselor. You canceled all of your appointments. You've attacked another officer. Yeah, sure, they were potentially a criminal. We were investigating, whatever, but it had nothing to do with you. You are not a security officer. You attacked this man. Attacked this man.
Yeah, and I just want to briefly say, little Ezri Dax, like the dude she tackles is like 6'4". I'm like, this is an example of I think that a lot of people who complain about modern storytelling, it's like, it's the idea that women can beat up men just as easily as the other way around.
There's a term for this. It's called waif fu.
Yeah.
Through the power of waif fu, they can bring down. Yes. Which, if you've never heard that term before, it's basically what David just said. It's when someone, and it's typically seen with a female character who's, maybe like 5'2", 5'3", 110 pounds. Again, a really light, waifish character can somehow, through the power of magic karate, drop kick a 6'5", 280, muscle-bound, no neck having dude halfway across the room, and it's fine. It makes sense.
It would have been better in that moment if the what's his name? Duran character, Duran, like the vision she has in her head, like he's kind of like forced her in some way to act, but like she gets bowled back by him, and the Jario character is just like, or Duran is like pissed off. Like, if that was me, he wouldn't have bowled me over. I'd have given him what for, you little twerp, you little Twinkie. So it would have been fun if like he had like in some ways influenced her to act, but she wasn't the physic didn't have the physicality that he had, and so he would be upset by it. That would have actually been more interesting.
Now, to her credit and to a point, just want to also say, she does start off by kicking the chair over, which trips the guy up. He stumbles, does not fall. He stumbles, but then she launches herself at him and she jumps on his back, which ultimately causes him to fall down. Now, is that plausible? Possible? Yeah, maybe.
Well, him
but
running
the
in the
part
first
that
place is what gets me too. Like he's a member of Starfleet on a isolated space station. Like, where was he running to anyway?
Right, and his reason for running doesn't make any sense. They say that he had replicated one of the weapons because he is a studier and collector of weapons. Okay, fine, that's not illegal. So you running away only makes you look guilty for something that ultimately they prove isn't a problem. So he never should have ran in the first place. And considering what we're supposed to believe about 24th century society and Federation and Starfleet in particular, he never would have run. He would have. They would have come up to him. He never would have
run. But I also feel like let me put it this way: who in the 24th century, the Federation, is a collector of weapons? I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, like, if there's ever there's an odd weapon that seems to have killed someone, Homeboy would have been the first person they talked to.
Yeah,
it would have been like, you need to give us an accounting of all where your weapons are.
Well, so. On that, there's two things. So on the one hand, as we've seen in episodes of Next Generation, and Picard has intimated a few times, that there is this, in society at that point, everyone has remarkable control and self-restraint. There's not a need to overindulge. We don't take more than we need.
Certainly
we don't use things, right. You don't use things that you don't have a reason to. So so with that also comes this intense respect of another person's privacy and autonomy. We're not going to look into what you're doing because you've given us no reason to. If you give us a reason, we absolutely will. But so long as everything else appears to be above board, we don't care what you look at, what you download, what you build, what you own. We don't care about any of that. We're just going to trust that you are utilizing knowledge and technology and materials in an appropriate and dignified manner. Right. And that's pretty much it. So when something like this happens, like, because even Sisko says, they looked into it only after the murder had occurred, that they start looking into who had accessed whatever and found out that this guy had accessed the plans for that weapon. That wasn't something that they ever would have looked at or found out about had a murder never occurred.
Right.
And so then when you think of, for me, the next part is when you think about it that way, him becoming, I guess, scared about being accused would make some sense, because since there's no real currency or whatever, you would assume that what they really trade on, especially within Starfleet, what you trade on is your reputation.
Reputation.
Well, I'm saying as a person, you trade on your reputation. You get things based upon the status of being beyond reproach. Like, that's why Picard can kind of come through a place and they'll give him whatever he wants because he's Jean-Luc Picard, know. But other officers who haven't built up that kind of clout, that kind of reputation, you got to do a little more to get whatever you want, your basics, until you build up said reputation. So I can see him being scared at first, because even the insinuation of being involved in a murder may be too damaging for his reputation. But again, still doesn't explain why he ran, because he's innocent. And he knows that he's innocent. He knows he didn't do it. And they even proved that he had an alibi at the time. He was on Bajor.
Yeah, by the time that she was dragged before Sisko for attacking the guy, they already knew his alibi.
They knew everything about him. Right. They already knew everything about him. Yeah. So it's just like, again, it doesn't make sense for him to have run, because he could have just explained all that. I'm a collector of unique weapons. I've got a wide variety of them that I keep in storage or whatever it is. No, they're not for any kind of personal use. They're all deactivated. None of them are armed. None of them have any ammo. And by the way, for XYZ murders, I was away. I was elsewhere. I I wasn't even in the vicinity, so I couldn't have done it.
Right.
Okay, done. You've checked all of our boxes. We're not going to look into anything further because we don't have a reason to,
Right.
and move on from there.
Right.
But yeah, like none of that made any sense about him running. And to the final point on her tackling him, even if you want to say because she made him stumble with a chair, that she could have knocked him down when she jumped on him, all that is fine. The problem becomes when she rolls him over and she's holding him down with one arm while she reaches across the way to grab the knife, and then she's holding him down while holding the knife over him. And it's not until Odo shows up and pulls the knife from her. There's no way her at that size was holding that big man down with one arm. He should have been able to clear her easily.
Yes.
Easily.
Yes.
And he doesn't.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those moments where like you're watching it and you're like, okay, I'm going along with the, suspension of disbelief to watch this. But I'm critiquing it while watching it. And even as we're talking here, I can offer alternate ways they could have played it. And I think those would have been better. Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, whatever.
Yeah. I often think of myself in these situations. That's just my favorite, whatever. And so when I see them fighting and struggling and whatever else, I imagine, what would I do? How would I react in the situation? And barring certain alien whatevers, can't think of many of them being able to stop me. And there's no way that little Ezri is taking me down and
remember, everyone, Perry is 6'8" and a former college football player, so that's kind of hard for anyone to do.
Well, but that's also the reason why I know that it wouldn't work when she knocks this guy down, because like he's not my size.
He could do it.
Yeah, there's no reason that he couldn't. Now, if I don't know, if the situation was Worf tackling that guy and knocking him down and holding him in place, I totally believe that. Absolutely. We know that Klingons possess superior strength. We know that Worf is a trained fighter in multiple techniques. We know that he is, very strong. There's no reason to believe that he couldn't do it at all. So, yeah, just so many misses. So many misses.
And I just want to say, because you brought up Worf, this scene with Worf was annoying because he's like, why are you on the promenade? And she's like, oh, you care about me. And he has to like roll his eyes like, I would care about O'Brien and Bashir. Like, I wish the show would make up his mind. Is Worf a caring individual who has kind of come to terms with his like heart of gold, if you will? Or is it true that he would honestly be protecting Bashir or O'Brien? Because I can see it both ways. Yeah, Worf would definitely protect O'Brien and Bashir if they were up in the middle of the night and something was making noise. But it's also true that he has a history with Jadzia Dax. So this is Ezri Dax. So maybe he is keeping an eye on her in a way that he doesn't for other people. So which is it? And I feel like this episode they just dump on Worf because she's like, oh, you do care about me. And he rolls his eyes. He's like, I would do this for anyone. It's like, come on, give Worf.
But I think that scene, that was entirely the point. I think that they were trying to make it to where for us watching it, you get to decide which way this Worf fall.
I just feel like Worf has been dumped on enough times. I want my man to like.
Right, and that's why to me I was like, I'm gonna go with what Worf said, which is I would have done this for anybody. I'm not gonna let them play into the whole he's got lingering feelings for her stuff, because that also potentially sets up an awkward love triangle that I don't like. I don't like him having to compete for her affection again while dealing with her flirting and obviously very much into Bashir. Yeah. Well, I don't want that for him. I want him to have moved on, or at least be fully committed to moving on. It's already hard enough. He's got to see this person who shares his wife's memories and everything else. But he's working on it. He's been working on it. We've seen that since episode 3 or whatever it was of this season, where he's been struggling with that. I don't want to see them keep trying to bring that up and interject that despite his best efforts, he just can't get over Dax. No, let the man grieve and move on.
Right.
And be done with it.
Right. I guess what I'm getting at is that, well, I guess I've already said it. I wish they would, if he's not still dealing with the flirtatious element as Esri seems to indicate here. I mean, he says it, but he like rolls his eyes like he's frustrated. Like everyone thinks that's how I am. I just feel like it's what it always comes back to with Worf's character is like, is Worf a big teddy bear or is he not? And it's like,
yeah,
he is, but like don't baby him because he's a big teddy bear. Treat him like a freaking man. I don't know. I just want Worf to get some respect around here.
Trust me. I've been wanting it for 30 some odd years. We're still not there yet. Heck, even in Picard, I feel like he kind of gets. I mean, he doesn't totally get the respect that he should have got. Riker kind of takes up the role of teasing him. Now, before we end this episode, we have been saving this bit here, so we have to talk about the weapon, the modified TR-116 with the fixed whatever it's called displacement modifier that allows you to shoot bullets through anything.
Walls. Through one end of the station to the next. Yeah.
I'm just going to say it. At no point have we ever seen that motion is transferred to an object when it's beamed. If anything, we've seen the opposite. We've seen that
good point.
When something is beamed up, beamed onto a ship, beamed onto a platform or whatever, if it was in motion, it becomes stationary.
Yes.
We've never seen it any other way. So
I agree with that. I'm thinking of the scene from the Star Trek movie, J.J. Abrams, where like they were falling off a platform, if I remember correctly, and who's the Russian guy? The Chekhov, like I got you. Like he runs over to the station, the holo or the transporter, and he does magic and he beams them aboard, and they like fall, like they coalesce, they're and then they like
right.
Any motion they had was stopped until they finishes.
And the thing is, and it's not that they dropped because they were falling per se. It doesn't transfer that motion. It's because the transporter lock that he had on them, they were already in space. Like they were moving through a void. They weren't on a platform themselves. So when he beamed them through, they didn't fall at the same rate of speed that they were falling when he beamed them. They just hit a flat surface and then plop down on the ground. Otherwise, if what they want us to believe is possible, as we see it in this episode, in that episode, or not that episode, but in that movie, what would have happened is he would have beamed them onto the ship and they would have crashed into the transporter platform at the same rate of speed they were falling, and they would have exploded because they went from, they would have suddenly had impact. They would have achieved maximum velocity via transport, and they would have exploded on the transporter pad. That's not what happened. We've never seen that happen. Right. I can even think like the closest that we ever see to anything like that is in an episode of Enterprise, where Captain Archer is running away from a Suliban named Silik who's shooting at him, and he dematerializes while he's running. And when he rematerializes on the transporter pad, he kind of stumbles forward, but that could be interpreted as
his surface he was on change.
Right. It's a transfer of location, kind of like if you're walking and you're outside on the sidewalk and all of a sudden in the blink of an eye, you're inside of a building, you're probably going to stumble a bit because you were just outside and now you're inside. So the sudden change in location is what throws your balance off, not the continued motion. Right. So, I don't like that in this episode. What we're seeing here is he's firing a bullet in one area of the station. It's picking up terminal velocity while it's in transport, only to materialize 3 centimeters from its intended target and achieve terminal velocity at the same time and kill the individual. If anything, from what we've seen of transport technology. The beam should have completed the transport. It still should have hit them because it still would have had some forward motion, but if anything, it would have like bounced off.
Yeah, it would
It
have
would have
lost
fallen.
enough energy,
Yeah.
not all of it. Yeah, that's a great point, and I'm glad you said all that because the entire time I was thinking about this as they were trying to explain it, I was like, this is the most magical assassination technology of all time. If you have moved away from, as they say, chemical based uh, projectiles, which is just as we would know it as like a gunpowder and explosion, it's a miniature explosion that shoots off the bullet, then and you moved away from that technology, and then you suddenly have the ability to fire a weapon, but in so firing the projectile, allow it to bypass any number of physical
Conduit, right?
obstacles.
Bulkheads, people, everything. You've completely circumvented all of that, which is again what we're doing with the technology in the first place.
Right.
That still doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it did. It didn't. It. Let me put it this way: that weapon would be so powerful, and
Yeah.
so like with the hull, you could see through bulkheads, and you can see anything, and you can shoot anything where it's going.
And you don't have to worry about tearing up bulkheads. You're not putting any holes in anything. No spatial ruptures. No other collateral damage from other people, unintended targets.
Right.
None of that. And it still hits its target at terminal velocity and kills them successfully.
Right.
And therefore also it makes the suspect pool huge because the shot could have literally come from anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I was honestly surprised they didn't do any sort of triangulation of like where the bullet seemed to have come from. Like, oh, if he fell here, if we try and recreate the crime scene, he was standing at this angle and it hit him here, and so we can say that it came from this. Like, I'm surprised they didn't ever do any of that.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it would have killed Esri's chance to solve it for herself.
I would have appreciated maybe them doing something like it's a short range projectile bullet that they still needed to hook the transporter thing to the rifle, because then what it does is it still allows you to shoot technically the weapon from anywhere, but then what it's really doing is it's beaming the bullet into the room with the target. Right. And then it like a missile at that point. Once it's in the room, it then becomes active and it immediately shoots across. And that would have been really cool to have that done. But I don't know if that wasn't thought of because of special effects and money and budgeting, or if they just never came up with it. I didn't see anything in any of the behind the scenes about the development about it. But yeah.
Well, let's ask this question. In your recollection of Star Trek history as the expert, do you know of a time when anything was transported, like the transporter technology itself was itself so small that it could somehow just affect like a bullet? Like the technology in and of itself that was small enough that all it affected was something as small as a bullet, and therefore, like, am I understanding correctly that the transporter beam like went with the bullet and like dissipated as the bullet hit the target, or is it on the gun? I guess it's on the gun.
The transporter device is on the gun.
Yeah, I guess that makes
the way that it works is it's mounted to the gun. So when he pulls the trigger, the bullet is dematerialized.
Right.
And then it rematerializes just a few centimeters from its target.
Right.
And hits him.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I'm getting at is that the idea of a missile, you fire the missile at the same moment that you transport it so that it lands in a space outside of where you were physically able of going, and therefore it could launch itself. And let's say it had maneuverability. Let's say it's a drone, even like a mini drone like they have over in the Ukraine, where you can it can move around and like you can bomb something. Like, that's pretty dangerous technology. That's pretty awesome. And the idea that like Star Trek just now thought of it is almost like, uh-oh.
Well, so we do see it on, let's say it's Voyager, and they are fighting the Borg, and they knock down the Borg ship that they're fighting. They knock down its shields, And so while the Borg shields are down, they beam a torpedo into the ship and
Right.
then detonate it like a bomb inside the
Right.
ship and destroy it. But that's the closest that we ever see to anything similar
Okay.
to that. No other time, I know they never did it in Next Generation. I don't
Well,
think they ever did anything close to that in the
yeah, because
original
it totally
series
makes sense
either.
that people would like beam aboard a bomb. We beamed it over there, and now it blew up. That makes sense. But the idea of a fast moving projectile being able to be moved quickly like that is just, yeah, it's like if you were an assassin, this is your weapon of choice. Like
A
that's
lot
what
of
I'm getting
times,
at.
yeah, a lot of times what we see is the transporter is used as a way of stopping something in motion. Something is trying to get away. They will try to beam a person away from the fast moving thing, or
Right.
beam the whole fast moving thing into the cargo bay. If that doesn't
Right.
work, then a tractor beam is like the next. And
Right.
in the moments when it is successful, what they do is whenever the thing is that's trying to get away fast is beamed to them, it's always stationary. It's gone from movement to secure position inside the ship. So again, we've never seen it to where, oh, we're going to beam your entire mini cargo ship into our cargo bay. The ship doesn't come careening into the bay and slam into the bulkhead. It
Right.
stops. It's,
Right.
its entire motion is arrested. So, yeah, nothing about the technology as we've seen it ever employed before would indicate that this was a capability.
Right.
So, without a greater explanation of how the velocity and the kinetic energy of the projectile is transferred through the act of beaming, this doesn't make any sense. So
Yeah.
we've missed they've missed two very, in my opinion, two very critical scientific points here that they never explain.
Right.
And we're just kind of left to be like, oh, it's cool. You got a gun. You can shoot through that walls. That was supposed to be the cool part. We got
Yeah.
a gun that can shoot through walls, but it's like, you didn't explain it well enough. Now
Yeah.
it's going to break
It
down
didn't
here.
explain it well enough. It's story breaking. It's like when Star Wars had in the Last Jedi, they had the ship use the light speed capability. Like she turned it on, and she shoots her ship into the big giant Star Destroyer thing, and it's great. It looks fantastic. But then everyone was like, "Well, then why the hell don't we just attach, light speed engines to whatever giant piece of junk you can get? Don't attach it to a ship. Just shoot those off into the Death Star kind of thing." It's so interesting and so unique a technology that it breaks the world that it comes from. And I'm
That
glad.
right there, that is it. That
Yes.
is the biggest thing, because it
Yes.
becomes whenever any genre does this level of specific world building,
Right.
and then they give us a weapon that totally devastates the world they built,
Right.
it doesn't make any sense. It breaks everything that's come before it. And
But
yeah.
the reason I'm glad that you know this stuff so well is because you're able to give an in-universe reason why it doesn't work, and therefore this technology is actually, it's taboo. Like this episode is like wrong. It's not that the episode introduced something that we need to now account for. It's like, no, this episode is wrong. It doesn't count anymore. It's got to go.
It doesn't work. And and as much as I would love to say I know everything about Star Trek, whatever. I will admit that there are things that I don't know, but based upon everything that I've ever watched in any episodes across the entire franchise, there's never been a time where anything like this has ever been done. So
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense in the use of the technology that they would suddenly be able to do this. And as far as I know, this is the only time that anybody ever attempts to do it. That weapon is never seen again. No
Right.
similar weapon is ever used again.
Yeah.
And again, it's just like, why wouldn't, like, we hear about the Maquis, who are obviously a resistance group, whatever, they are fighting with whatever tools that they can get their hands on. Why wouldn't they have something like this?
Right.
Or other militant groups have something like this, but we never hear of it again. So
Right.
that's another thing to me that just kind of says that this was something that was clearly done to kind of give this episode a bit of an edge, but poor execution combined with a very confusing and conflicting story
Yeah.
makes all of it unmentionable, in my opinion, or at least not worth a second view.
Yeah.
So I could see why people might even skip this episode. Nothing
Yeah.
about this episode makes it worth a rewatch.
Yeah. It has made the flashbacks where we've already had Joran mentioned. Those episodes conflict with this episode. The technology about the gun conflicts. Yeah, this episode just is a big, I don't know, sore thumb.
Yeah.
It's a episode that doesn't fit properly. It wasn't as good as it could have been. I mean, again, it started interesting, murder mystery, but by the end, at the end, when the Vulcan says logic demanded it for his murders,
Which again
what?
made no sense. So I know we're kind of running over a little bit, but now we have to talk about that because I have been doing a little bit of just kind of a behind the scenes review here. And it
Okay.
turns out I was correct. The main writers that had been in use for basically all of season 7 up to this point and the majority of seasons 5 and 6, all of those main writers were busy on other shows. So apparently they developed episodes in tandem. So it says that the episodes Prodigal Daughter, The Emperor's New Cloak, and Chimera were all in development at the same time that they recognized they needed yet another episode, which became this one. They reached out to Robert Hewitt Wolf, who had written and directed some other episodes of Trek before, in particular Deep Space Nine, but he had not been active for a while. So it sounds to me like, again, they recognized that their A team was busy or was too taxed to do yet another story. They needed someone. They felt like he was a safe bet. He came up with the story. They probably didn't vet it as much as, maybe they should have. He even says that it was supposed to be an Odo show, but then Wolf wanted to change it. He wanted to give something to do with Ezri, and then they used, as he calls it here, trill mumbo jumbo to explain Duran's involvement as well.
Right.
So yeah, then they used a Vulcan serial killer. Vulcan was chosen mainly because they wanted they wanted an entity that would shock us, because it wouldn't be shocking if we heard about a Bajoran assassin or a Cardassian assassin or a Romulan assassin, but a Vulcan who we've kind of, has achieved vaunted status, for their logic and their seeming incorruptibility to have fallen so far from grace and to be this, deadly killer. That was something they were hoping would have a particular shock value. But it fails because Vulcans have to have a reason for why they do everything.
Right.
And yes, it's based on logic, but logic itself is not the reason. They arrive at a decision based upon logic. A to B to C. Right. So whatever the initial thing was, you have to give us a logical argument for how he went from that trigger to this reaction. And they don't do that. And instead of trying to even give us one, they just gloss over all of it by saying, because logic demanded it. Well, how did logic demand it? What evidence did logic present to you? Because they almost make logic sound like a third person, like a third entity that somehow convinced him to do this thing. That's not how Vulcans use logic, at least not in any way that we've ever seen logic used in the reference of Vulcans and Star Trek. Never seen it used that way before. It was a cheap, crap out explanation at the end of the episode because they didn't have time to really give us an explanation that we needed.
Yes.
This writer here, Robert Wolf, for all your successes in other episodes, you failed. Yeah. I'm marking you down once again. You failed on all fronts.
All of the victims had pictures framed of their loved ones, and they were laughing, not just smiling, but laughing, and that so offended him. Yeah.
Right.
you tell me if this is true or not, but I would have almost preferred, and I'll follow up here with you in a second. I would have almost preferred for it to be that he had emotionally snapped. Like he really had
Yeah.
emotionally snapped. Like maybe he had indulged his emotions on that ship that was destroyed,
Mhm.
and now he can't turn that off. But is that not fair to like? Are the Vulcan characters supposed to be truly immune from emotions? I mean, I feel like that's
So,
not
so that is
quite
also
right.
something that is, yeah, misconstrued. It's not that they don't have emotions; it's that they precisely control their emotions through a series of mental disciplines and meditations and a very firm belief system. They maintain a tight control on their emotions. They can express them somewhat, but most of the time, most Vulcans go the route of, total stoicism. Um, we see in other Trek shows like Enterprise, for example, there was a subset of Vulcans who believed that emotional exploration and understanding was actually the true way to go about living your life. Um, with mixed success, one guy becomes incredibly violent and attacks T'Pol at one point. We're kind of given like a rape analog in their interaction. Behind that, another one, he's just, he seems very jovial. He seems very friendly. You know, and there it is. But that was in the past. That's the 22nd century. By the 24th century, it's pretty much widely accepted that Vulcans all have
Tight
established this very
discipline.
firm mental discipline.
And it's unique
So,
to them as a species. Like, are they
yes,
able to transfer that discipline to anyone else?
not necessarily. So, we know about Vulcan mind melds and how the mind meld will influence the person that they meld with, but they also are influenced by the individual. We see this in the episode Sarek of Next Generation, where Sarek
Yep.
comes onto the Enterprise. He's clearly suffering from the early stages of Bandy syndrome, I believe they call it, and he melds with Picard in order to give himself the stabilization he needs to get through these negotiations he has to do. But
Right.
the reason that Picard is chosen is because Picard also has a very disciplined mind. And
Right.
so the hope is that between Picard's own natural discipline and Sarek's abilities, it will allow him to hold together long enough to get through these negotiations. And it works. But we see the trade off from that is that Picard is left utterly devastated for hours, if not days, after this particular mind meld experience.
Mhm.
He does carry some of Sarek's memories afterwards, but he doesn't become like Vulcan like himself
Right.
at the end of
Right.
it. He returns to his natural state
Right.
once all that processes through him. So we
Well, I
do
read.
see, well, real quick, because Vincent brought it up, we do see there's a character on Voyager named Lon Suter, who is a complete psychopath. He murders some people on Voyager. He ends up melding with Tuvok. And again, same thing. Tuvok's mental disciplines and stability help Suter to get through his his rage, basically, what makes him a psychopath. But the trade-off is Tuvok becomes so overwhelmed by the power of
Rage.
the rage and the emotional onslaught from Suter. It's also important to note Suter was a full-on Betazoid, so
Wow.
emotions with Betazoids are always going to be heightened at a particular level.
Right.
So Tuvok takes on all of that, and Tuvok kind of loses his mind for a bit before his natural Vulcan disciplines kick in, and he is
Right.
eventually able to purge that
Right.
from his system as well and reestablish his control.
Gotcha. What I was going to say is I really like the idea of people, Vulcans are just people, being in a position where like they can feel emotions, but like they have enough distance between like the emotion itself and their recognition of it that they can like interpret it without letting themselves give into the emotion. Like you
That is
feel.
a great explanation you just gave. I like that a lot. It's actually something that Tuvok says in the episode too. Is that
Okay.
it's not that they so much, suppress the emotion so much as they recognize the triggers for certain emotions. They
Right.
see it. Basically, they see it coming, and so
Right.
they prepare for it. They accept it, they allow the experience, and then they move beyond it before it can unduly influence them.
Yeah, like the idea, like you know what angers you, you know what makes you angry, what triggers are there, and so when you feel that emotion, you don't deny the emotion in the sense of like it didn't happen. It's like I acknowledge it in my own internal way, and I express myself in a way that doesn't give in to impulsive behavior. I'm just I'm emotionally engaged enough and mature enough that I can handle those emotions. And like Vulcans have like mastered that as a species. That's a great thing.
Exactly it.
And it's great that like Star Trek like so early on figured out how to make that like a whole like species. Like put it this way, Vulcans have mastered it as a species, but you can perceive that as a skill that anyone, humans otherwise, could learn. That's what I was getting at earlier.
Yeah.
Like, is it truly just something internal to them, or how much of it is something that is external to them? For example, the Romulans.
The Romulan offshoot. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and they talk about that too. You know, that the Vulcans, you know, they say it to humans a lot about how humans don't make any sense, because on the one hand, humans can seemingly be a very, you know, by the book scientific people, and then in the same breath we can be deeply spiritual and religious, and then we can be emotional hotheads, and then we can seemingly embrace logic. We confuse Vulcans because it's like they've gotten to a point where that kind of split faceted personality doesn't really exist for them anymore. They've learned to control those things to keep themselves as a entire species on a particular path. They don't have that kind of splits anymore. And the last time they did have that, that's what gave rise to the Romulans. The Romulans did not agree with the path that Vulcans were on. They split off from them. They went to a whole other planetary system and developed their own civilization, culture, society, and whatever else. And that's why, even though they look similar, they are not, and they don't have the same mental disciplines and so forth. And Vulcans have, on multiple occasions, tried to teach other races, humans in particular, how to embrace their form of logic. And multiple times it's been said, Spock has said it, T'Pol has said it, Sarek has said it, that humans can employ logic the way that they do, but you gotta want to, you know, and that's just kind of like the foundation is wanting to do it. So yeah.
Do you know? I mean, just getting curiosity. If we're going over, fine. But like, do you know how much Vulcan or the Vulcan mindset is supposed to be tied to like Stoicism? Like, I've never studied Stoicism, but I know that's
it is
supposed to be like based on Stoicism.
From what I understand, or from what I know anyway, Gene Roddenberry was very taken with the idea of logic and Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius, who wrote extensively on it, was an influencer. Now, how deep down into that Roddenberry ever got, I don't think that's ever really talked about. But then, you know, the stuff kind of takes on a mind of its own to a certain degree. And the writers of Star Trek over the years, also, they have touched on Stoicism and Shintoism and Taoism and all these things, and how they kind of, there are certain aspects of all of these things that you can kind of relate back to how Vulcans view logic. So, yeah, I mean, like, if you're interested at all, there are a couple of books that really kind of go into it that I've read that are all based in the Star Trek universe. But yeah, there is some correlation, but it's not a strict discipline for discipline, like line for line. You're not going to be able to match it up that way.
Right. Well, before we finish, I did want to say Vincent's been great in the chat. He's been all over this episode with us. I agree with him. So Vincent, you said that the actor who played Duran is different in this episode than in the previous episode. And I did notice that. And if I remember correctly, when Duran was initially introduced, he was like a young man. Like
he was young. Yeah, he was a young guy. He was like maybe
20 something.
Yeah, 20,
Yeah.
early 20s.
And he was a musician, and I did actually really like the scene where in this episode Duran is in her like nightmare or something, and like he's playing an instrument, and it's not a piano, but it's kind of a piano, but it was enough different that it wasn't the piano, and I liked that a lot. I was like, they did a great job of coming up with something unique but relatable. As he was a musician, but the idea that he was like in his 40s and that he seemed to like I don't remember the character who killed 3 people as being quite like relishing it as much as he was just insane. Whereas this Duran is a sociopath. You know, he's a calculated killer. He enjoys killing, and that's what makes him weird in this episode. It's like that was a part of the problem too. Is like this version of this Duran character is different than he was been introduced before. And as you said, it's not like there were a bunch of episodes where we had to go peruse the character or the symbiotes to like figure out how this would work. Then the other thing you were talking about, Vincent, earlier was some of the episodes where Jadzia was kind of like the main character. My point though is that in those episodes, especially the ones you mentioned, like Blood Oath. Blood Oath is the one where Jadzia goes with the 3 Klingons to go on their
and Koloth.
Right, to go on their mission. I forget what
kill the albino.
Yeah,
to eat part of the albino because he poisoned their kids.
That's what it was. Okay, so but that episode was about her fulfilling an oath as Dax. It was not a Jadzia-centric episode in the sense that Jadzia was coming to terms with her own morality.
Yeah, that Jadzia, right. It wasn't about Jadzia's skill set. That was about a oath taken by Dax. In particular, Curzon, but it was the oath of Dax to them. Right. And it had nothing to do with Jadzia and her.
Like Ezri could have been the one who did.
Ezri could have also Ezri could have done the Blood Oath episode too.
Right.
This episode is different because they specifically asked Ezri to do this because of Ezri's background, as with forensic psychology, which then had absolutely nothing to do with what happened in the episode. That's
so true. Hey, what do I remember from school? Well, remember the memories of the guy who's like, symbiote you still have, and let's pull up a ritual where you consult with a freaking, axe murderer. I mean, I don't know about going to a prison and asking the prisoners about what they think about your current case, a la, the Silence of the Lambs or something like that. But that's kind of how she goes about it. The other thing I want to point out, you also mentioned, Vincent, the episode Rejoined. Similar thing, I would say. That episode is not so much about Jadzia per se, as much as about that the Dax symbiote had already been married in a previous life to the woman who's also carrying a symbiote. And the reason part of me to bring up that episode is because anyone who looks up any reviews about our show, that is the one episode people hate us for, and particularly for me and the way I responded. And I want to say, despite any personal reservations outside of the episode, it was reasons inside the episode that I focused on for why I thought the episode was flawed. Yeah. Anyone who wants to peruse my take on it, you're welcome to go listen to that.
Yeah, go back and listen.
If you go on our website, if you go on Apple Podcasts, Yeah, if people did not like my take on that episode. But another reason I also mentioned it is because in the last episode, Kira and Ezri did have a girl-on-girl kiss, which was definitely not as momentous as in the Rejoined episode. It was very much okay, that just happened. I didn't know it was going to happen, and that tells us about the characters, but it didn't have the emotional weight the Rejoined episode had. Excuse me. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Vincent is always great in the chat. Whenever he joins us, he always has a lot to say.
And we appreciate it. We appreciate
100%.
Any and all feedback. But again, and I like that he also sticks to our main rule about any and all feedback, which is be polite, be courteous, or else we'll kick you out. So, no, but again, great. We love the feedback that we get. So we're glad. But I think that is going to do it. As Vincent had said earlier, the worse the episode, the longer the show. That is definitely true for us. It's not intentional, I promise. It's not intentional. It's just that sometimes, you just got to get down into these things and kind of deconstruct them so that we can see why it's bad and
Why
hope we can make it better.
Yeah.
They can make it better.
You don't pop the hood on your car because things are running well. You pop the hood and get in there and fiddle with it because something's going wrong, and you make it better. So that's I would say the analogy for why we do what we do. So.
And the last thing that I will say about the actor of Duran, yes, while we do know that a different person played them in this episode, they did attempt to reach out to the original actor who played Duran all the way back in the very first appearance of Duran. But unfortunately, schedule conflicts kept that person from being available, so they had to move on with someone else. So there you go.
Makes sense. Yeah, makes sense. I mean, that episode was like season 2.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, no one's going to stay on retainer for 5 years and hope that, Well, I think that is going to really do it for us on this one. It is a bit longer, but hey, it is what it is. Just real quick, also, Vincent did the legwork for us and pointed out that our very first episode aired on August 4th, 2021. So we've been doing this show for 4 years. We're coming up on our 4-year anniversary. So we're gonna have to do something special episode on August 4th. Now that I know the date for sure, do something there. That'll be great. Okay, I can't believe it's been 4 years. I was already kind of skeptical when you said 3, but 4 years. Yeah.
I remember calculating the number of episodes versus the number of weeks and being like, it'll take us 3.5 years to get through it all if we keep it on time. And we've had enough after dark episodes or miss an episode here or there that 4 years and plus makes sense. So
all right, well, okay, well, we've survived the 4 years, so we'll just keep on going, of course, until we're done, and then we'll switch over to who knows what. But until then, that's going to do it for us, guys. No new Trek updates tonight, just to keep it short, sweet, and simple. Probably get into that stuff next week as well. So until next time. Take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.